podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
No breaks. No breaks. No fear. No fear. The official British Speedway podcast.
We made it to the end of the 2022 season and the Poole Pirates are champions of the championship. Coming up soon, we're going to hear from two of those firmly involved. Neil Middleditch, the team manager, on his 10th league title and, frankly, a points machine for the Poole Pirates. Richard Lawson, who ended the season in the grand final with a paid maximum. We're going to be chatting to those in just a couple of moments' time. We're also going to be reflecting on the 2022 season as a whole. There's been a lot happen over the course of the season since things began in March. We can't talk about every single thing, but we'll look back on some of the highlights and also forward to 2023 as well. I'm joined by Dave Rowe, who has covered, I think, more Speedway meetings than anyone in Europe, not just in British Speedway, but of course in the SEC and in the Grand Prix coverage as well, working with Eurosport and Discovery. Ryan Guest, who you may know from this podcast, of course, providing many interviews, but also appearing on the centre greens of Sheffield and Birmingham, and Joe Appleton, who's never been far behind the major action across British Speedway as well. All that to come on this week's episode of No Breaks, No Fear, as we look back on 2022.
No breaks, no fear. The official British Speedway podcast.
The season finally came to an end then on the deepest Leicestershire suburb of Kings Lynn at the Adrian Flux Arena, where the Leicester Lions and the Poole Pirates met for the second leg of the Championship Grand Final. It was finally poised. The Pirates had an 8-point lead. That was cut down to just 2 points after the first two heats at the Adrian Flux Arena, but it was all settled in heat number 12.
And away we go, the tapes rise. It's a good start from the Leicester Lions there. Richie Worrell on the inside. His brother Steve Worrell, though, putting pressure on his brother, and Steve Worrell hits the front for the Poole Pirates. As it stands, this would be enough for the Poole Pirates to become champions. Steve Worrell needs to keep there and stop his brother getting past him for the next few laps.
Yeah, but Zach Cook's moved into third place ahead of Max Clegg to make it a 4-2 for the Pirates. But yeah, sensational start there from Steve Worrell from gate 4. He went for a big blast around the outside and hit the front down the back straight, and that's what it looks to be where he's staying. But yeah, Zach Cook, he's muscled his way into third place and on for a 4-2 for the Pirates. But we see Max Clegg, I think he just pulled up there at the back, but yeah, it's going to make no difference to the score lines. It's all Pools.
Max Clegg has retired from the race. This pretty much hands it to the Poole Pirates here, barring any disasters in the closing stages of this race. Coming round the third and fourth turn, Steve Worrell is going to bring home the 2022 championship to the Poole Pirates.
You know, I don't think I've ever featured any of my own commentaries before, but that was me commentating on the grand final, heat number 12, when it was all decided at the Adrian Flux Arena. Now, two people who were side by side. In fact, I think Middlo was patting Richard Lawson on the head for much of that heat. So, Neil Middleditch and Richard Lawson, welcome to No Breaks, No Fear. And starting with you, Middlo, firstly, huge congratulations. Another league title. We'll talk more about that. And the 10 that you've amassed in your career in a few moments. But this team, tell us about this team, because it just seems like you've been an unstoppable force, especially in the second half of the season, winning the Knockout Cup, and then now the league as well. Of course, you were still in the Final Four for the Jubilee League, and unchanged throughout, which is amazing in itself. But just tell us about this team of 2022.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I think we had, it's fantastic this year. The fact that we started with 7 and we finished with exactly the same 7. And Poole are a bit renowned for sort of being a bit ruthless with swapping riders around. But no, it was nice to walk in the pits every week and see the same 7 faces. And I think that attributed a lot to the team spirit and to the success.
Has that ever happened in your career before, to have that same 7 all the way through? And only using, I think, ride replacement and a guest in, it was a Jubilee match, wasn't it? So I think you have been the same 7 all the way through.
Yeah, no, I've never known it like that. No, it's been, as I say, it's been a real pleasure to every week. I know everybody, how they all work, and it's nice and easy for me.
And for you, Richard, of course, you are a new addition to the Poole Pirates lineup, and bit of a swap deal, wasn't it, with Basso going up to Glasgow, having won the title with Poole last year. You coming into this side, you've been with a number of clubs over your career, of course, in British Speedway. But how has it been being part of this Poole Pirates team this year?
Yeah, I mean, I've said it so many times. It has just been awesome. It's from the one I went there, the first day I went there, just everyone, accepted me with open arms, and it, like Middlo was saying, it's just a good atmosphere in the pits, and you don't always get this at clubs, and I can't put my finger on it what it exactly is at Poole, but you get there, the atmosphere is great, and you just feel like you want to do well for a club, and I think that speaks to the success. So happy to be a part,
And for you, you've had success. You've won trophies before in Speedway, of course, with the various clubs you've been at, but you've never won a league title. And it's taken your journey across British Speedway. And I've got the list somewhere here of the teams that you've ridden for, and it's lengthy: Workington, Wolves, Peterborough, Lakeside, Redcar, Glasgow, Somerset, Ipswich, Eastbourne, Plymouth, Kings Lynn, and now a league title. So it was the Poole Pirates that did it for you.
Yeah, it took some searching, I guess.
Did it come out from the start, mate?
Honestly, it was part of the appeal, coming to the club. Like I said, that the success speaks for themselves, and I desperately wanted a league title. I'd come close a couple of times. I've been in playoff semi-finals, playoff finals, and things like that, but never ever got it over the line. And this season, it just had that feeling about it. I think from the midway point, it was, for me, wasn't saying it out loud, but I was thinking, I've got a good chance of doing this year, and it was, getting more and more real as the season went on.
And for you yourself as well, Richard, I think your performances at the championship level have been solid. You've been a solid rider, and I think one of the toughest competitors. You obviously you're always a pleasure to deal with and stuff, but you always know that when you're lining up in a race that there's going to be a battle to that first turn, and if you don't make the first turn, you're going to battle all the way, even if you're in fourth, which is something very regular. We did see it once, but very very rare that should happen. And your stats speak for themselves, because I think through the regular season, there's 54% of your races you finish first. But when it came to it, and this is the thing at Middlo as well, we'll come to you on this, that when it really counts, when the trophies are on the line, the big performances come. And for you finished, I think, every of the races that through the playoffs, and you went through the quarterfinals, of course, in that as well, so there are extra meetings. You finished 75% of your races you won.
Yeah, I didn't know them stats, to be fair, but they sound good. But yeah, I mean, I do kind of, as a rider, I thrive off like the pressure heats. I do like heat 13s and 15s, and like when we get down to the playoffs, I'm really up for it, and try and pass it on as Middlo does, on the track walk and stuff. You when it comes to playoffs, you've got to put it all on the line. That's what we've worked all season for, and I'm all about that.
And Middlo, winning the trophies, that's what Poole are about, isn't it? For so long, you like winning the trophies. You get that, I guess you get that winning feeling, shall we say, that you know what it's about. And Poole have got a habit of coming strong just at the right time. And as I say, looking at the stats there, when it gets to the playoff stage, when you get to August, September, that's when the big wins seem to be coming. And that's why you've got the trophy in the cabinet.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, we had a little blip earlier on, and Leicester sort of turned us over at home. But after that, the boys all pushed on, I think, and everybody dug deep. I think, as you say, Richard, Stevie, and Danny was solid all throughout the season. And I sort of look at the races and then think, well, I'm looking at the heat advantage here. But I think, the engine room, Ben and Zach, sort of, they really stepped up their game halfway through the season, and Drew and Nathan. But everybody played their part at one meeting or another. But I think the whole continuity that we had throughout the season was the key factor.
A word about the first leg of the grand final, because it got off to a bit of an ominous start, didn't it, Middlo? What were your thoughts after those first few heats at Poole Stadium, where Leicester were running out 5-1s and 4-2s and so on? Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, it was a bit of a shock, wasn't it? Because everybody's going, we'll have 60-30 like we did in the Knockout Cup, and I knew they were a wounded animal when they came to us, and they wanted to sort of return the favour. And 10 points up. We were staring down the barrel of a gun, weren't we? And I was looking through the programme and thinking, where are we going to get this from? I pulled the boys together and said, look, we've got 4 or 5 heats now to get something out of this. Any sort of a lead I was looking at. I wasn't, originally people were saying, what do you want? I said, I want 10 or more. And at that point I was thinking, I'll take 4. But no, the boys dug really, really deep and get an 8 point. Okay, it's 2 races. And they, to be fair, they pulled those back in the first couple of heats at Kings Lynn. But, they just really didn't have an answer for us.
And even though on Friday night, Leicester again got off to a big start and pulled it back to 2 points, and the nerves could have set in at that point, couldn't they?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, obviously Ben and Zach had never even seen the place, so it was a bit of a new place for them. But no, we're the Pirates, and I think again going back to the 7 boys, we've been mates since March, and we've all lived together, raced together, and you just don't want to let your mates down. And sort of going back to the success thing that Rich was saying, we want success at Poole, and that's Matt assembles teams. We build teams with riders that hopefully are going to improve. As I say, Rich, Steve and Danny, they've already proved themselves. But say Ben and Zach and Drew and those boys, a little bit of an unknown quantity. But they all came to the show.
And Neil, for you looking back over your 10 titles, and of course some great names that you've worked with over that time, Greg Hancock and Darcy Ward and Chris Holder and well, obviously people know who the riders are, and now of course Richard and this current 2022 team obviously go down in history as being your boys that have done the business there. But of those league titles, I don't want you to single one out necessarily, but just your fond memories of winning silverware for Poole perhaps over that time.
Yeah, as you say, it's difficult to recollect. It's been 10. I'm saying it's an awful doesn't say, well, I've won so many, but no, I think you mentioned Greg Hancock there, and I think that was a time when that year we were sort of languishing just below the playoff places, and I think it was at Grand Prix, and Matt said to me, "Can you have a word with Greg, who I've known quite well for a long time?" And I said to him, "Can you come and do a few meetings? It may only be 3 or 4 meetings." And he said, "I've never won a league." I said, "Okay." I said, "We'll win the league for you," and we did exactly that, and we've done exactly the same for Rich. So it's they're special, because it was special for Richard, and I say it was special for Greg.
Well, I bet when we started this, Rich, you didn't expect to be compared with Greg Hancock by Middlo there at the... But you're in the same boat.
Yeah, I'm in good company, I guess.
As you mentioned there, and this is the same for you, Rich, success is what the Pirates are all about. And I guess if the call comes from the Poole Pirates and there's a chance to race there, and as Middlo's just sort of mentioned, really, that there is a good chance of having some success on your CV if the Pirates give you the opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. Just like we've said, I think it comes with like confidence as well. When you, as a rider, when you win in races, you grow that confidence, and I think as a club as well, that they keep winning titles, and that's for a reason. And I think that, they're just keeping that ball rolling now, and it's what the fans expect, and it's what promotion expects. And when you come there as a rider, that's what you're aiming for. So, long may it continue.
Aside the league title, and of course you've won the Knockout Cup as well, so you're a double trophy winner this year with the Poole Pirates, of course. But what are your personal highlights, Richard, when you look back over this season, the ride that you've been on with the Pirates this year?
Hard to single out like a particular meeting or race, but I mean that whole playoff, I think we as a team we just shone. It felt like it was never in doubt, although hindsight you can say that, but there was a confidence throughout the team, which I felt that we were the team to beat. Although we didn't finish top of the table, when it come playoff time, it just felt like it was ours to lose. And so that playoff, that whole part of the playoff, the quarterfinal, semi-final, and then obviously the grand final on Friday, that's it's going to be the cherry on the cake for me. But there was individual races and meetings that were special as well. So it's just been a great season for me personally.
And Middlo, obviously, we shouldn't forget as well the man whose birthday it was on Friday, I believe, Gary Havelock, who's joined you in team management duties, especially on those northern adventures, and he was the man who was in charge of part of the playoffs, of course, up at Glasgow, which had to go twice, as we well know, with the weather setting in after Heat 6. But Richard, I think, was voted Rider of the Month on BSN for that heat just before the meeting was postponed, ironically, so there was some juice in the track there. But Gary Havelock's helped you out, on those Northern Tour and very much part of the success too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, what Javi brings to it, I mean, we have different ways of team managing. I sort of pace up and down the pits and Javi's, say, a tad more. I'm pretty vocal when we're winning, but, Javi's still got his finger on the pulse, I think, more so than me with bike setups, tracks, things like this. He can pass on that knowledge to the boys. Obviously, I've ridden, can still hear a bike if it sounds, spinning or dying or whatever, but Javi sort of brings out a little bit extra to it. And he's been tremendous. It's sort of saved me trips north. Not that I don't want to go up there, but it's just, with business commitments and things like that. But and the nice thing is he is as enthusiastic as I am about winning as well. And he doesn't say he wasn't as a rider, but he just certainly showed his love for the club at Poole, because he's rode for me both to Pirate and in Team GB, and it's a pleasure to work with him.
I think with Javi, the advice he gives, and this is what riders say, is that he keeps it very simple. And there's no shortage of technology starting to come into the sport now. There's no shortage of people offering to sell riders stuff that maybe they do or don't need. Whereas Javi just keeps it simple. It's like, just do this, and then you'll go faster. And if you go faster, you might win. And it's just sort of some fairly basic advice, really. But, he certainly keeps it simple, doesn't he? He's
got the world title. I mean, most stuff you wouldn't be allowed to say on any social medias or TVs. But, we know, the boys know how he works. And I think that they admire him for that too.
I had him as a co-commentator on BSN at Redcar. And if you saw that, then, yeah.
Yeah, I did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It was good fun.
Yeah. Javi has no filter.
No. Looking ahead to next season, later on in this podcast, we're going to be chatting a little bit about some of the rule changes have come out about how the championship might look going forward to next season. Each team racing home and away twice, and it's going to be a lot more full on in terms of the league meetings are going to be coming a lot thicker and faster, and maybe obviously we're missing out the Jubilee League tournament and that kind of thing. So it's going to be emphasis on the league. Are you pleased to see that, and the fixtures coming thicker and faster through 2023?
Yeah, I think the league is the one everybody. I think tend to say some of the crowds will maybe lose a little bit of interest with some of the trophies or the competitions they put on. Great to win the Knockout Cup, but the league is the one that everybody wants, and I think that's the same with the fans as well. I mean, they just want to see team racing and league racing, and I think the fact that you can get more meetings is going to be good, particularly for guys like Ben and Zach who haven't been doubling up. But hopefully they both, if they come back to us next year and they'll get a championship place as well, a premiership place as well. So I think more meetings, a bit more continuity, just get the season running and get out of the way before the end of November, basically.
Yeah, because nobody wants to be racing in November, of course, and we've seen what happens when we race in November. The tracks are very hard to set up, and the conditions are different. The bikes perform differently as well. And I guess for you as well, Richard, you want to know where you're going to be racing. You want to have more consistency in the racing. You want the meetings because that helps you as a rider, doesn't it? But at the same time, you want to be riding the meaningful meetings.
Yeah, exactly. I think Middlo hit the nail on the head there. It was a little bit frustrating. A couple of times this season we had breaks in our schedule. There was a couple of weeks that we didn't have a meeting at Poole on a Wednesday for quite consecutive weeks. So that was a bit frustrating. I know Danny and Matt felt the same. It's a bit frustrating. I feel like we should be Wednesday nights. It's racing at Poole, and you get your home fans. Get them into a regular racing. So I think as a rider myself, coming in week out, riding your same club on the same night, I think that's definitely a positive.
Yeah, and looking ahead to next season as well, and we also know that we're probably going to be having the same 9 teams that were left at the end of this season. Of course, unfortunately, we lost Newcastle, but it seems more positive this year going into 2023. We don't have many question marks, really, apart from obviously Edinburgh, who are pretty sure they're going to be at the tapes. But like last year, we were talking about, will Newcastle be there? Will Birmingham be there? And all these kind of discussions. But we look like we've got 9 teams now for the championship, and we know where we're likely to be heading next year. Yeah,
definitely. It's good to have that security, isn't it? And just puts British Speedway in a better position. You never want to see losing clubs and things like that. So it's fair play to Birmingham. They've committed to another season, and I think 9 teams in the league. That's good.
And of course, you've got family involvement in a track that might be yet to be confirmed into maybe the National League. But tell us about the work up at Workington on North Side that your dad's firmly involved in bringing back to life. It looks tremendous from what we've seen. Dan Bewley's been blasting around there. I believe he's the track record holder, as he is at a few places. Have you had a go yet?
I haven't, and I haven't even seen it. Like, I've seen the videos like most other people, but me living down in Cheltenham, it's quite a ways up there now, so I've not had the opportunity to see it for real yet. So no, I spoke to Dan about it. You know, he spoke highly of it. It's a nice shape. It's going to create some great racing. So no, I think that's another exciting track. You know, there's a lot of support in that neck of the woods. So hopefully they can get some racing. I don't know what, maybe next year, and you know, you might see them in the championship in the not too distant future. Yeah,
it'd be great to get new tracks back in, and especially Workington, Middlo. I mean, you've had a few ding-dong battles up there, and of course, as Richard touched on, a huge historic fan base at least. If you go back to the days of like Carl Stone era, and it was like the Pied Piper leading everybody back to the hotel or whatever, wasn't he? You know, it was a big deal up there.
Yeah, it was. I mean, Workington's always been, as you say, it was sort of Stoney's manor, wasn't it? But yeah, no, great club, a lot of history. You know, obviously raced up there back in my Eastbourne days. But yeah, and as Rich said there, you don't want to see clubs closing, any clubs closing, and you know, Speedway's having a tough time, tough enough as it is, without losing any more clubs. You know, look at the clubs we've lost: Eastbourne, Somerset, and as you say, Newcastle. So any addition to any Speedway, any level, it's got to be a bonus for the sport.
And Middlo, looking ahead to next year, I'm not expecting you to announce your team plans here and now, but your preparations are underway. Are they all ready for 2023 and retaining these titles? Yep.
No, there's things in there I've been talking about over the last few days, but yeah, no, I mean that's it. I mean it's a numbers game, isn't it? We don't know the full points limit or whatever, so it's going to be a case of, sadly, we're going to have to lose somebody, but hopefully we can maintain the core of the team and build around that.
And you've got the heat leaders, of course. Richard, one of them, but of course Danny King and Steve Worrell have contributed massive points. But the points have come right throughout this last season, haven't they? There's no sort of obvious weak points, really. And particularly Ben and Zach Cook, who have been instrumental, real trump card, and even in the grand final on Friday night, turning a 3-3 into a 5-1 and really giving you the momentum at that point in the meeting.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, you know, it really shows some, you know, what a racer Ben was. You know, he certainly doesn't give up. I mean, he's a tiny little thing. He's a little pocket rocket, isn't he? But he's got the heart of a lion. And as you say, both him and Zach were sort of instrumental in a well, everybody's instrumental, obviously, but I think their form particularly helped us maintain the momentum towards the playoffs, and hopefully we can keep them. But you know, I just don't know. You know, we just don't know yet. It's too early to say.
And finally, what's the winter got in store for the both of you? How do you spend it? Because obviously you're not jetting off to Australia to get involved in more Speedway action, as some of the guys already are. But what about you, Richard? Well, how's the winter go for you and preparations for next year?
Yeah, well, I'll take a little bit of time off. You know, it's been a bit hectic these last few months. So yeah, a little bit of time off. But I got some work going on at the house, so we'll get all them kind of things finished, and then just get back into my training, get the bikes ready, and get everything organised, and probably get back to a little bit of work, keep some income coming in. These gas bills aren't getting any smaller.
Oh, no.
So there's always that. But just make sure everything's ready and I'm in tip-top shape for March.
Good stuff. And how about you, Middlo? Are you squeezing some golf in or what?
Yeah, I'll be squeezing a bit of golf, and I've just come back. I've just booked a holiday for next Tuesday. I'm going to go off to Tenerife for 7 days with Susie, my wife. So that we're looking forward to that, because we haven't had a proper holiday since before COVID. The house is getting quieter. All the Aussies are heading back. Brady Kurtz, he went back last night. Zach and Ben are going back tomorrow. So we'll have a couple of beers tonight down the pub to say goodbye to them. But yeah, no, just running the family business really, and just keeping occupied. It's and wait until March.
And that's something that maybe a lot of people will know about if they're a Poole fan. But you have a lot of Speedway riders living with you, don't you, in your manor? And yep. So it's a very busy Speedway place around there.
Yeah, it always is. I mean, you know, the boys always come and stay. If it's Plymouth Tuesday, Poole Wednesday, some of the teams will come and stay, and obviously my boys, they'll always come and stay. We've got 4 workshops here for the boys to do their bikes. It's been the same since way back to the 60s. Obviously, Tony, Darcy, all those people have all lived here over the years, and it's nice for the riders because it's not 5-star luxury, but they've got a workshop to do the bikes, which is what they all and a pillow to put their head on. And I think that's all they need. Yeah, it certainly works pretty well, and it's nice for them to have, I'm sure, and for them to be able to chill out and relax with people, like-minded people. Couple of Jack Daniels in the kitchen with me, it's been known. Good stuff. Well, look, all the best for the winter, and looking forward to seeing you back in action again in 2023, the two of you. Okay, cheers. Thanks, you're right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, the legend that is Neil Middleditch on No Brakes, No Fear, along with the legend that is Richard Lawson, who's won his first league title, and Midlo's got his 10th. And he's not going to stop there, far from it. Now, in the next part of No Brakes, No Fear, we're going to start our review of 2022 and look ahead to 2023 with three guys who have seen more Speedway than I think anyone else has in Great Britain. I want to meet that person who's seen more Speedway than Dave Rowe. And then when you add Ryan Guest and Joe Appleton, and well, I've seen more Speedway this last season than I've ever seen in my life before as well. So I think between the four of us, we've probably seen everything firsthand in one form or another. So we'll have a look at what 2023 might hold and look back on some of the things that have happened in 2022 as well, and much more besides, with Dave, Ryan and Joe and myself having a look back on 2022 next on No Brakes, No Fear.
Between aging and busy lifestyles, many women struggle with maintaining their physical and mental wellness. At Aquavita Concierge Healthcare Services for Women, we can help you revitalize your health and reclaim your life. We start from within by balancing your hormones, allowing your body to achieve and maintain desired weight goals. We also specialize in peptide therapies, regenerative medicine, sexual health, and aesthetics in our state-of-the-art facilities. Feel better, look better, live better at Aquavita. Visit aquavitality.com and begin your journey today.
No Brakes, No Fear, the official British Speedway podcast.
Welcome back. I'm Ian Brannan, and for the remainder of the podcast, I'm joined by three more guests on the podcast because Middlo and Richard Lawson have departed into the night. And joining me to fill that space are three people who have gone hand in hand with every move and twist of British Speedway through 2022. And I think between the four of us, if we were to be your phone of friends on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire or something, and the subject of Speedway comes up, then I think certainly for the 2022 season, I'd be pretty confident that we'd be able to not only answer that question, but at least one of us would probably have been there. Dave Rowe, who of course not least has not just been covering British Speedway and writing for the likes of the Speedway Star, but also working with Discovery and Eurosport and on international meetings as well, such as the SEC and Grand Prix coverage and everything else. Ryan Guest, who's been on the centre greens of Sheffield and Birmingham, but also writing for the Speedway Star and providing content for this podcast as well. And Joe Appleton, who's been covering Speedway for various social media channels through the course of the year. I don't know how many matches combined will have all been to. Obviously, been to some of them at the same time as each other. But, I mean, Dave, I think you've been at more meetings than anybody else I know. How many meetings did you end up attending this year?
I was counting it during the year, and it was up to 87 meetings, including Friday's doubleheader, which I actually counted as one meeting. Some people said I should have counted it as two, but 87, including the doubleheader at King's Lynn last Friday. It's been a long year.
Yeah, it has, hasn't it? Just 87 meetings just from Dave Rowe alone. It's a great effort. I would be counting that as two meetings, by the way, on Friday. I certainly am. Let's talk about 2022 then, certainly for the Premiership season. It all started at the National Speedway Stadium on that bank holiday weekend, right at the start of May. And really, it gave us an indication on how the season is going to go in just one meeting. Bellevue hammering Peterborough, the reigning champions. And of course, Bellevue went on to reach heights that they've not achieved for 29 years. And for the Peterborough Panthers, it was a wooden spoon after a league championship.
Yeah, and that meeting started with Bellevue taking 4-5-1s against Peterborough in the first four races, so that did sum up the way it was going to go. Peterborough started the season in the league season in poor form. Then when some riders began to get some form back, they started suffering from injuries. They just never got it turned round, so an unfortunate year for them, one of those years. Bellevue, on the other hand, always in the top four, always very strong at home. Their away results weren't that great, but they really got it right when they rode at Ipswich in the semi-final. Then, of course, they had the injury to Max Frick, and so you're saying again, again. Bellevue are going to lose a big rider on the eve of the playoffs or during the playoffs. Brought in Robert Lambert, and of course 2 maximums at home, and in that very interesting and dramatic final against Sheffield, of course they edged it by 2 points.
Yeah, it was all very close in the end, wasn't it? And we'll talk more about the end of the season for Bellevue in a bit, and of course bringing Robert Lambert in and that whole argument, because I know Ryan's got something to say on that front as well. But Ryan, first of all, you've spent a lot of the season, as well as reporting on the whole of British Speedway, but you've been on the centre green. You're the centre green announcer at Sheffield, so you've been at Ollerton. You've also done a bit on the mic at Wolves as well through the course of the season. So let's talk about those two sides, and beginning off with Sheffield. Frustration, I suppose, at not getting that title, but it all culminated in a great evening at Ollerton, and they came so close and can still be proud of getting to the final. After all, Sheffield still relative newcomers to the Premiership level of Speedway.
Yeah, definitely. I think obviously the ambition shown by the management team there and the promotion with Damien Bates heading it all, basically. I think everyone always expects Sheffield to be in the mix, knowing the sorts of signings that they're going to make. We saw that in the first season. We actually saw it when they signed Nicky Pedersen for that season that never happened. But as you say, they compiled a team, assembled a team that everyone knew was going to be right up there all season long, and so it proved. They made a couple of changes along the way, some enforced, some through just a choice of feeling there were stronger options available. And like you say, it's definitely a step in the right direction. Semi-finalists last year, grand finalists this year, and I know now they obviously want to go one better in 2023 by lifting the trophy. But I think there's huge amounts that everyone up at Ollerton Stadium can be proud of, and plenty to build on heading into the winter now.
And as for Wolves, of course, always there or thereabouts, and they didn't quite manage to get it over the line this time, but they've certainly made the first moves in terms of announcing riders for this year, along with Sheffield, of course, getting news out there of Sam Masters being part of the lineup for next season, and Luke Becker as well, already been named. So Peter Adams keeping his faith with 2 of his most reliable men this last season.
Yeah, no real surprises. I don't think Chris Van Straten and Peter Adams have obviously been involved for, I think it's 3 decades now at Monmouth Green working together, and they've always shown a tremendous loyalty to their riders. Some would argue too much loyalty at times that potentially has held them back along the way. I know this season there were calls at one point just before the playoffs that potentially some supporters felt that they could strengthen up ahead of the playoffs to give them a better chance. But like I say, loyalty is something that means a lot to both Chris and Peter. And as we're seeing already, some of the same faces coming back for next season. I think with Wolves this year, watching them on a regular basis, particularly at Monmouth Green, normally it's something of a fortress. And I know they only had 2 blips in the league, both against Ipswich, who ironically have got quite a terrible record at Monmouth normally. And there were circumstances that went in the Witches' favour on both of those occasions. But I never really got the sense that Wolves were as dominant at home this year, which is something that obviously plays a big part for the Paris International Wolves. And I don't know, I just never felt it was quite going to click. But at the same time, Wolverhampton always seem to turn it on. I think that's now 7 consecutive playoff matches they've lost, dating back to the grand final of 2017. So they know things need to change, and they know things need to be a lot stronger come 2023 at Monmouth Green. And
the other 2 sides, of course, in East Anglia, and again, quite opposite fortunes really for the Ipswich Witches and the Kings Lynn Stars. Kings Lynn jostling down at the bottom with Peterborough, trying to avoid bottom slot for much of the season until things sort of started to change around in that final portion. And for the Ipswich Witches, dominant at the top of the table for much of the season, and then of course losing out right when it counted. Joe, I mean, you've covered plenty of action from that side of the country. What would be your standout thoughts when you look back at the Ipswich and the Kings Lynn seasons?
Well, for Ipswich, it was obviously a much improved season for them. I think the signing of Jason Doyle at number 1 was without doubt the best signing of the season. When you've got an out-and-out number 1 like Jason Doyle, who is going to win the vast majority of his races, you can maybe afford to carry a few riders along the way here and there and still pick up those home and away victories. there was quite a few close calls at home, but I'm sure Richie Hawkins and Chris Louis, the reason they brought Jason Doyle in is when it comes down to, heat 13, heat 15, if they're there or thereabouts, they know they've got Jason Doyle to call upon, and then all they need is someone to pop out the start with him, and he'll nurture them round to pick up the victories. Obviously, they lost Eric Riss to injury and made a couple of switches at the end just before the playoffs. Didn't quite work out for them in the end, but I think they'll definitely want to keep Doyle next year and try and build a side around him to take that next step. From a Kings Lynn perspective, I think it's an incredibly frustrating year for them again. Knowing Alex and Dale like I do, they want to win so badly, and they'll be so frustrated about how things panned out in the end. It all started so well for them really at the start of the year. League Cup campaign, they started the season like a house on fire. Victories over Ipswich at home. They were looking really good with Josh Pickering flying and a real team effort week in, week out. The key moment for them, I think, was the situation with Niels Christian Everson. Soon as they lost his services, it all seemed to go a bit downhill for them. They were using rider replacement for a fairly long time, and that led to struggles, especially on the road, and a few costly home defeats. Bringing Nikolai Clinton, Fredrik Jakobsen obviously gave them a bit of hope, and they did come close away from home at Sheffield and Wolves, picking up crucial points that could have pushed them closer to those playoff places. But I think in announcing Fredrik Jakobsen for next season, that's a real statement of intent, because I think he's been absolutely brilliant since he's come in for Kings Lynn. You only have to take a look at his scores in the Polish Extra League to realise how much of a good rider he is and how much he's come on in the last few years. Coming in on a 5-point average, that is a really good start to their team building for next year.
And looking at next year, as much as we know, and we'll talk more about this soon, we'll probably focus a little bit more on the Championship. But Dave, we've already seen some key signings for clubs such as Jack Holder going to Sheffield and Fredrik Jakobsen. These are all, Fredrik Jakobsen going to Kings Lynn, of course. But these are all big-name riders that are going to be performing in Extra League next year. So this is good news for the British League, isn't it? That we are getting some of these big stars back now. Not necessarily the British ones, and of course, wait and see on that one. But we've already got some big names in our league guaranteed for next year.
Yeah, really good news for the clubs first and foremost. And clearly, riders like Jack Holder and Freddie Jakobsen have come into these clubs. They enjoy what they're doing there. Jack Holder's been at Sheffield for a couple of years now. Jakobsen came in mid-season for Kings Lynn. Clearly gets on with the people at Kings Lynn and wants to improve with that club. Scored good points as well. So it's good to have them back. But also from the point of view of making a distinction between our two leagues and not having too much doubling up. The Premiership and the Championship, on occasions the argument has been, or the accusation has been, that they're too close together. Well, hopefully, with the more riders coming in from elsewhere, that won't be the case. Obviously, we do need to keep some doubling up for the UK riders who need to race in both leagues. But I think most people would say we shouldn't have too much of it. If we can get more riders from the other leagues in, then that will be good news. We don't know entirely what the regulations will be, particularly concerning riders who are racing in Poland. That's all to be signed off as things stand, so fingers crossed things will improve there. But yeah, to have these riders already committing so soon after the end of this season, only going to be a good thing.
Yeah, and it is only sort of word coming out of other countries at the moment, and as you say, it's yet to be officially ratified. But the word is that obviously currently a rider who's racing in Poland can race in one other country, and next year that might be two. But it sends a great signal out that riders like Jack Holder, for example, are signed up in Britain, and other riders will look at that and say, well, that's maybe something I want to do and help attract some of the very best into our leagues. And, we'd love to see Dan Bewley back, for example, wouldn't we? And other Grand Prix riders. And there's all sorts of word going around of various names that might be heading back to these shores. But that's great that we might see a bit more fluidity in 2023.
Yeah, we do know the financial incentives that exist in Poland, particularly with the broadcast deals there. They are quite clearly far in excess of what's being provided elsewhere. But by the same token, there are several riders who need to be active and are much, much better for the fact if they do race 4 or 5 times a week. It doesn't work for everyone, but some riders, they need to be on the bike virtually every day, and to give them the opportunity to race in more leagues is a good thing for them. It boosts their form for all their league clubs and individually as well. So certainly if you can give them that choice, that's also a good thing.
Ryan, I want to talk to you about the rule book because I know it's a subject close to your heart. Let's be honest, we've had a few unneeded, unnecessary controversial incidents in Speedway over the course of this season, things that could have been avoided if perhaps the wording in the rule book was a bit clearer, or people were aware of what they needed to do at that particular moment in time. Talking about, say, the Premiership pairs that had to be resolved by a bit of a lucky dip. The British final, where there was that long meeting in that room, the media room at Bellevue, to work out what to do. Robert Lambert, the fact that he was blocked from joining, then allowed to join at the last minute. These are all things that have caused, admittedly, a lot of debate amongst fans, but I think many fans would like to see these avoided. You've been involved in them, as I say, in some respects. You've been at the centre of them. You've been the man on the centre green explaining this to the crowds. What are your thoughts on the rule situation?
Yeah, we've certainly heard strong opinions from so many people over the last few weeks. I know, obviously, Damien Bates at Sheffield went on a whole rant when the whole Robert Lambert situation kicked off. And what you've got to bear in mind is Damien's not only a club promoter, but also the vice chairman of the BSP as well. So regardless of Sheffield, British Speedway in general, someone like Damien, he's so passionate. He just wants what's best for it. Some of the situations that we have stumbled across this year, looking at the rule book, when you read it in depth, it's some of the rules are so obvious that they contradict one another. Others, it's not until you come across a situation where you establish that there could be an issue. But I mean, when you receive the rule book at the start of the season, honestly, it's like it's got such a thickness to it that it doesn't need. And as I remember Damien saying, how complicated can this sport be? It's 4 riders on 4 bikes doing 4 laps. How hard can it be? And I believe it was completely rewritten from scratch a couple of years ago. I think it was after or during the COVID lockdown. But to me, there are that many rules that contradict one another, that don't have any clarity at all, like we saw in the last round of the Premiership pairs, where if the rule was written and worded correctly how it was intended, there would have been no confusion whatsoever. And I think one of the first things, if they're not already, that the SCB need to be doing ahead of 2023 is getting this rule book simplified and written with a lot more clarity to make British Speedway look a lot more professional to everyone else on the outside as well as on the in.
I can't help but thinking as well that if there is something that's a tie, that's deadlock, that can't be sorted out in any other way, that there needs to be a visible way of doing that, an exciting way of doing that rewards the fans. Get the riders out, have a run-off or something like that, because people don't turn up to stadiums to watch a tombola. And I can't believe I'm saying that, but, that is the truth. And, whatever happens, there needs to, in a football match, there'd be a penalty shootout, for example, or in a cricket match, they keep bowling until somebody got caught out or whatever it would be. There needs to be a sporting way of resolving a deadlock, I think.
Yeah, and I totally understand as well, but when they said it was an obvious one from that perspective, where nominate one rider and let's sort it on track. Peter Adams did flag up at the time. He said, do we really want an individual runoff in a pairs event, which you can understand. But look, when there's nothing that establishes it firmly in the rule book, and to be fair to SCB referee Seth Perkin, he did everything by the rules that night. And it did go down to the fact that pieces of paper had to be folded and thrown into a cardboard box and one was pulled out, which is, look, if you say that about any professional sport, that sounds ludicrous and ridiculous. But again, it goes back to the rule book. If the rule book was worded how it was intended, then we'd have been able to sort that situation there and then. And as I said at the time, if Chris Harris hadn't crashed on that final lap or on that final bend, then it wouldn't have been as easy a case as just swapping points around for Wolverhampton and Peterborough. It would have been a whole completely different situation. But like you say, it was one of those situations we only stumbled across because it's a new competition, new rules have been brought in, so it was one that was stumbled across. But like I say, just clarity is needed, and more than anything, we need to bring a bit of extra entertainment to supporters on the terraces nowadays as well.
Now, when it comes to the rule book, I have to say, hand on heart, if there's 2 people who know the rules of British Speedway inside out, it's yourself, Ryan, and it's Dave Rowe. They absolute encyclopedias of the British Speedway rulebook. Close your ears if you're Mark Lemon. I know Lemo listens. All right, Lemo. Regarding Robert Lambert, with regards to the rulebook, Ryan, should it have happened?
The signing of Robert Lambert for Bellevue should never have happened, and that says so in the rulebook. There is a clear date of August the 28th, which was a transfer deadline. And yes, there might be a contradictory rule, which was introduced at last minute a few pages later. But no one will ever convince me that signing should have been approved. It was turned down on a couple of occasions by BSP members before going to an SCB appeal. But I mean, you look at situations in the past. I think Bellevue fans went on about Ty Woofenden signing for Wolverhampton in 2016. When you look at the facts, though, he actually competed in some league meetings before. Didn't join after the regular season. Certainly didn't join once the playoffs were up and running. You look at Wolverhampton in 2017, actually, as well, where Paris International Wolves lost both their top two riders in Jakob Torschel and Freddie Lindgren. They had to rely on a guest and rider replacement. So, like I say, clarity and simplifying the rule book is needed so that something like that doesn't happen again. Okay,
Dave Rowe. That's what Ryan says by the book. It shouldn't have happened. But is it a case of well done to Bellevue for spotting the grey area and exploiting that?
The transfer window regulation in the Premiership was the regulation that was used, probably not entirely in the way it was expected to be written. But if you talk to Mark Lemon, he would tell you that Sheffield utilised the transfer window more so than was expected in the first place. So there were two sides to it. Bellevue and Sheffield will never see eye to eye on this situation. And one thing I'll completely agree is we need to clarify what's going to happen in the future. But what I would say is that if anybody else was in the situation that Mark Lemon was in and had the opportunity, or felt they had the opportunity, to bring in a rider of the calibre of Robert Lambert, then I'm sure they would have done so, and presumably it would have gone through. Maybe the other question was Robert coming in on his average from 3 or 4 years ago, when of course now he's a world-class superstar, whereas at that point he was a developing rider who was clearly going to be good, but not as good as he is now. So there's definitely two sides to it. It went through, and fair play to Mark Lemon for asking the question and getting the answer he wanted.
Yeah, Ryan Guest there, casting the fishing rod into the Bellevue pond just one more time this season. And there's the respective thoughts there, but I think we can all be agreed that if we can get a simplified rule book and make things a little less complicated, probably all be in a better place next year. Next, we're going to talk about the Championship. Now, we do know a little more about how the Championship is going to look and operate in 2023, and we'll talk more about that in the next part of No Brakes, No Fear.
No Brakes, No Fear. The official British Speedway podcast.
Welcome back. I'm Ian Brannan, and my guests for the remainder of the podcast are Dave Rowe, who's a well-known voice and face around British Speedway, and I think he said he's attended, 87 meetings so far this season, and also Ryan Guest and Joe Appleton, who I think between us all, we've probably seen every single meeting in British Speedway and beyond through the course of this season. Now, the BSPL confirmed at the weekend that several key decisions have been made in order to assist the forward planning for the Championship season in 2023. They've had a general council meeting, and they've seen the structure for next year agreed, with a focus on more meaningful meetings and the overall sustainability of the league to protect its long-term future. This includes a limit to rider guarantees, with any club found guilty of breaching this regulation to incur a significant points penalty in the league. With Leicester expected to move into the Championship next season, it looks like we're on for 9 clubs, the same 9 that ended the season, with Edinburgh back for another season at Armadale. And it's also been agreed that teams are going to meet each other home and away twice in the regular league programme through 2023, a 32-match schedule, which is an increase on recent years, but will ensure more regular league racing. Now, the first thing that you will see if you go looking online is, but that's more fixtures. We couldn't get them all in time this year. how are we going to manage it next year with 32 fixtures, Dave? Now, we spoke about this with Middlo and Richard Lawson earlier. Middlo thinks it's a great idea. If Middlo's a fan, surely that's got to be good news, and it's going to mean for more meaningful racing, isn't it? And doing away with like a cup competition that took up half of the summer.
I think it's a massive step forward, the proposed championship schedule for next season. I know the argument that we've heard recently has been, well, the playoffs we know went on until November, so we're going to put more league matches in, so how are we going to finish them? Well, you have to look at the way this season was scheduled, and unfortunately for a number of championship clubs, they weren't racing enough league matches in July and August. What this will do is it means they're going to be racing 16 home matches, with the good news that Edinburgh are continuing next year, and hopefully that means we'll be seeing consistent championship fixtures scheduled throughout the summer, which is good times for crowds as well. I know why the Jubilee League was brought in this year, the mini league, which ran in the summer. I think when there were 10, 11, 12 teams in the championship, the feeling was there would be perhaps too many teams to do 2 home, 2 away. I think now there's 9 teams in that league. 2 home, 2 away is obvious, and there's no reason at all why that can't give people consistent, meaningful fixtures, but still be finished by the end of August, and is a natural cut-off point for league matches, and then a playoff set-up for September that hopefully doesn't drag on too long into October.
One tournament that does live on is the Jubilee League of 2022 into 2023, because the grand final of that will be held as a bit of a season curtain raiser next year. And an interesting one, because Leicester, of course, are leaving the Championship and are making their way up to the Premiership. But nonetheless, they'll be facing each other in an interleague tournament right at the start of the season. I'm calling it the Coronation Cup, because it'll be closer to that than it will be the Jubilee. But it'd be great to see Poole and Leicester facing each other one final time, because of course they won't be meeting again in 2023, but two sides that, with the history of the grand final and the knockout cup, of course, that they've got a little bit of history over recent times.
I think it's fair to say that the Jubilee League didn't progress quite as expected this year, and obviously the intention initially was to have a one-off 3-team event at Sheffield. Then that got changed. I think most people agree with the idea of a 3-team final, and then obviously Glasgow had their reasons for deciding they didn't want to take part. So we were left with Leicester and Poole, and then of course what wasn't ideal there was they were already meeting in the Championship Grand Final, and they just met also in the Knockout Cup too. And then you had the track issues at Leicester, bad weather in Poole as well, delayed the final, and yeah, I mean, not ideal for the situation to end up how it did. But the all I can say is that the silverware will be fought out, and so that will go in the record books next year. And what always happens, has always happened before, when you have two teams from different leagues meeting, tends to be early in the season, then you would have one of those teams would slightly change their lineup in order to match the strengths for the appropriate league. So in what is a situation that no one can be particularly delighted with what's happened with that competition this season, I think there will at least be a decent finale to it early next year.
The Championship on the whole has been a great product, and it's produced some fantastic racing. Of course, you've got great quality riders in that league, riders that many of which will be appearing in some form or another in the Premiership, with many doubling up, of course, but not all of them do. But it has been exciting to watch. But there's always been that question of how do you differentiate between the Championship and the Premiership? And there have been these rules put in for 2023 about rider guarantees and, you know, the whole sustainability and the financing of the Championship to really stop overspending in the Championship, really, and rein things in. Joe, just tell us about that move and how you think that's going to affect things for next year.
Yeah, I think it's a necessary step, especially for the club's sake. Like, I don't know the ins and outs of financial deals with riders and so on, but I'm pretty sure that the gap in wages between Premiership and Championship just gets closer and closer every year, just to the point where it's pretty much the same, and it shouldn't be that way. It's a completely different level, and for the club's sake, these riders should be getting paid like the right amount of wages for each league. The top tier should be clearly way in front. And rider guarantees, I know most riders are professional and they'll give their all no matter what, but if you're riding for every single point, and you're getting paid per point, then you're going to give your all in every single race. Whether your team's 20 points behind, 20 points in front. I think it's a necessary step. We don't want to see many more clubs close. We lost Newcastle this year, which is extremely unfortunate and a sad situation. So this is just a step that will hopefully mitigate the risks of paying riders over the odds and clubs not being able to afford to keep running.
And rider costs are one thing, aren't they, Dave? But obviously you've had involvement in Birmingham and things that have gone on behind the scenes there. But the other costs of running a Speedway club are pretty vast, such as renting your stadium, medical cover, a huge thing. Birmingham were party to that firsthand, of course, earlier in this season. These are all massive costs that you've got to cover either by sponsorship or adding money onto the gate. And obviously you don't want to do that too much with the cost of living crisis, and you don't want to increase the prices on the gate where possible. But still, these things have to be paid for. They're non-negotiable.
Yeah, those figures are different according to which club you are, and obviously whether you own your own stadium or whether you're working with Greyhound landlords, for example. Rent is massive, and also, as you say, on the day expenses. People ask the question why meetings get called off much earlier now based on weather forecasts quite often. And one of the reasons is that although we don't always believe it, weather forecasts are actually more accurate now than they were 10, 20 years ago. And sometimes if you feel there's simply no way you can run it, then it's a decision you have to take, because you just see the money that's going to be thrown away if you just let things run until 6 p.m. and get an inevitable answer. Sometimes you get it wrong, sometimes it is wrong, but that's the way it has to be. And we have to just try and keep, every club has to try and keep going in the best way it possibly can. We saw it, for example, at Birmingham this year, which is one local to all of us on the panel here. We saw a season that started with a raft of rain-offs, and then when they finally got a dry night, there was the crash with Josh Orty, and the meeting had to be abandoned because there was no ambulance cover, and they then had to fork out for the remainder of the season to make sure there were 2 ambulances present. And I know that's been happening across the country at several other venues too, and it's all more expense, and it's things that clubs are having to do, but it's all the things that people don't see.
Yeah, and these are things obviously that need to be taken into account, and in the budgeting, and obviously that goes down to the gate price as well, and trying to keep that. There's not a great deal of money to be made sometimes in Speedway, is there, Dave? Between getting the gate price right and making that attractive, being able to pay the riders, and avoiding making a loss. It's very difficult for a promoter, especially when you've got other events going on around and about your place as well, which is one of the reasons why Leicester have made the decision to move to the Premiership also, because they've got competition from rugby and football and other events going on in the East Midlands on a Saturday night, of course, as well. And finding that right balance, it can be a tricky science.
I think you give a good example there with Leicester, particularly in the light of what's happened in the last week or two. And there's been some incredible conspiracy theories going on about the situation with the track at the Poole Pirates Sons Arena and the eventual move to Kings Lynn for the grand final last week, and how anyone could possibly imagine that could have been some way engineered, when Leicester against Poole would have been almost certainly the biggest crowd at that level this season. They could have been looking at 2,000 people easily at Leicester for that grand final, and they knew that by going to Kings Lynn, they would not only have to pay Kings Lynn to run the meeting, and fair play to Buster, by the way, because he put on a brilliant track on Friday for a double header, so he did a superb job, but it was never going to get anything like the crowd it would have got at Leicester. So these are all things that's money that they've worked towards achieving this year by having a successful team and making the final. And then, of course, in the end, I'm sure that the final was an unhappy exercise for them, not just in terms of the sporting outcome. So, again, at times you have to have fairly deep pockets in here. And going forward, they've made their call. They've said, well, the Premiership 4 or 5 years ago wasn't for them. Their business is now on a stable footing, as it has been for the last 3 or 4 years at Leicester. They have local opponents, more so in the Premiership, and they want to run the Thursday nights in the top league. So you have to give everyone, everyone has to take their own decision based on their own circumstances. The rest of the circumstances now are that they feel it's the right time to move up. But I do feel a lot of sympathy for them with the track situation, with the illness to Stewart, who we hope gets well soon. Everything just conspired against them in the last 2 or 3 weeks at a time when they should have been looking at their most profitable time of the year.
It is good news that we've got Edinburgh back, because they'd had their farewell meeting and all the signs were pointing towards the fact that they were going to have to at least miss a season, even as recently as just a few weeks ago, and now things have changed around there. Edinburgh have got this extra season now at Armadale, and they can reassess their options going forward. But it's also important that for Speedway in that area of the country, isn't it? Particularly with Glasgow, because of course where Edinburgh's track is possibly slightly as close to Glasgow as it is Edinburgh geographically on the M8 right in the middle there, and also for like teams like Berwick, for example, and these local derbies they do generate fairly decent crowds for those respective clubs, and for to not have Edinburgh visiting those tracks would be a huge loss as well. I mean, I think to be fair, Edinburgh travel quite in numbers wherever they go, don't they?
Yeah, obviously it's great news about Edinburgh, as Joe touched upon earlier, and it goes without saying we don't want to lose any clubs. We can't afford to lose any more clubs. And when you think of the likes of Glasgow and Berwick, say in particular, obviously they're probably their 2 biggest crowds of the season against the Monarchs. And I know, speaking to riders who were involved in that Glasgow-Edinburgh derby this year in both the Jubilee League and in the Championship itself, they've said that they've never experienced like an atmosphere like it. So from that point of view, obviously it's great. And from the league's point of view, Edinburgh, for so many years, I think it was 2014, 15 or something around those years anyway, they obviously dominated the second tier and were really competitive. They did fall away for a few years, so on that front it was great to see them back in the mix with the likes of Sam Masters and Josh Pickering this year, Paco Castagna chipping in along the way as well. And they obviously had an improved season because I tipped them to be towards the bottom. So, but we know by now that's how things work out. But like you say, it's great to know they're safe for at least one more year, and hopefully things continue happening behind the scenes to ensure they've got a much longer future to look forward to as well.
And for Glasgow, they came close yet again, and they've made huge investment, not just in their team, but of course in the whole infrastructure. And I remember a year or so ago we spoke to Peter Fasenna, and winning the league title for them was really everything before they felt they could even consider moving up a league. There's always people saying, well, Glasgow should move up, and that's obviously not something that they're looking at doing. But winning that league title is a huge priority, isn't it? And a lot of disappointment, I'm sure, around the Glasgow ranks when things went the way they did when they took on Poole in the semi-finals, because they really felt that this was their opportunity this year.
Yeah, obviously, as you've mentioned there, the Fasennas have had big investments from the moment they walked through the door. I think what they've done up there in terms of transforming the stadium, I have to hold my hands up and say I didn't go before and I still haven't been. But from what I've seen on social media pictures and videos and everything, the way they've invested in the club is hugely admirable. But it must be getting to a stage now where they must be thinking something has got to happen soon. They do invest big money. They invest a lot of time as well. For some reason, the blend never seems quite right. And again, you always know they're going to be there or thereabouts, but there was just a feeling this year. Even I remember they had a big spell in the middle of the season where they were winning at home and they were going to places and winning quite comfortably as well. But even then, you tried to compare them to Leicester and Poole, and you never felt that they'd quite got the strength that would be able to get them over the line. And I know they had Craig Cook. He was absent for a period of time, and I know they had a couple of injuries as well. But it must be getting to the point where the supporters, as well as the owners, are just craving the silverware, and it's almost at a time where it needs to come when you invest in the way that Glasgow are.
I mean, the investment in Glasgow is obvious. You walk into the stadium, it's always spotlessly presented, clean, tidy, got an air of fresh paint about it more often than not as well. And, it's a great place to watch Speedway, and they brought some huge fixtures to Scotland as well, not least the Grand Prix race-off as well. So the effort and investment is clear to see, and I think they'll be very much keen to get the reward on the track in 2023 as well. Let's just talk about the National League. Because whilst Leicester Lions lost out in the Championship, the Leicester Cubs were the victors in the National League over the Mildenhall Fen Tigers. It was a bit of a mismatch in the end, unfortunately, with the way the rules presented the options to Mildenhall to cover for all their many injuries, and only 3-pointers and unattached 3-pointer riders were available. So it wasn't really a fair contest, you can definitely argue. But looking towards next season with the National League, it looks like we may well have a new club joining there. And we're talking earlier with Richard Lawson, his dad's Steve Lawson's track at Workington, looking like they may be making a bid for National League status.
That would be good news if that's the case. I know they were looking at initially hoping to do it for this year, and the project got set back a bit. There was some vandalism at the stadium, which was obviously very bad news. They've had to improve the infrastructure. The pictures and the videos look sensational, so I wish them all the very best. I know they have been looking at doing a couple of perhaps open meetings this year as well, but I think they just decided to put that back a bit and make sure everything was right for the future. Fingers crossed. We desperately need more tracks. It was a crying shame when we lost Workington a few years ago, so to get this North Side project up and running would be great, and I'm sure there's definitely a market and a need for younger riders to come in that part of the country. So that's fantastic. And I know it was Dan Bewley had some rides around the track recently and was very very complimentary. So that's great news. The National League is serving its purpose. Leicester were deserved champions. There's no doubt about that at all. They had the right mix of the team all the way through. They had some fabulous youngsters who got better and better as the year went on. Max Perry and Vinnie Ford were two that really took strides this year. A lot of sympathy for Mildenhall. You mentioned the situation they found themselves in the final with all the injuries. It's been a constant bugbear of mine in the National League that facilities don't exist when you have 2 or 3 riders who are injured. Quite legitimately, you have to go down into the 3-point unattached list. It's nothing new. It's not new to Mildenhall this year, but unfortunately it happened for them in the grand final, and that did definitely take away from the final. Leicester got the job done at West Row a week or so before, when Mildenhall were much nearer to full strength. Leicester still went and won there comfortably, so no doubt at all they deserve to win it. We've seen some good youngsters coming through, and just hopefully in the future we may be able to have a situation where teams can cope a bit better if they've got people missing.
A hugely important resource, of course. It gives those riders that experience, and as you say, Max James, for example, he got his 2 rides as a number 8, but you know, what a great 2 rides they were. And I know that he's a rider that Neil Vatch has talked about when we've had him on as being one of the stars of the future. And we're starting to see those riders that have been bubbling away on the 250s and now onto the 500s for the last year or so now coming through. And I think potentially next season we could see a few more of those in the likes of the Championship. Perhaps, you know, the likes of Ace Piper, for example, being another name that really seems to be ready now to mix it with the big boys, Ryan.
Yeah, and the National Development League is completely different to, say, I think it was, we're going back, say, 6-7 years ago now, when obviously the bigger names were involved, like Birmingham and Cradley, who used to throw some big money at it as well, and Lakeside and Eastbourne. And like you say, it's now back to what it was originally intended for, where you've got the top boys in that league are either reserves or second strings in the Championship. And as Dave touched upon with some of the names there, and yourself with Ace Piper and Max Perry, they've had brilliant years. Youngsters who've been on the youth championship scene for a few years now as well, and we've seen them steadily rising up the ranks. And it might not be the product that it was in terms of the competitive nature of quality of rider, but nevertheless, some of the racing you see these youngsters having a real good go and throwing the bikes at each other, blasting it round the boards. It's great to see, and like you say, it all bodes well for the future of British Speedway in general.
We've seen a lot of Speedway between us all in 2022. There's been many highs and lows. Let's just round off by hearing your highlights of the Speedway you've seen, the Speedway you've attended, the events that you've been party to in 2022 around the Speedway tracks. And you've seen quite a lot, Dave. I'll start with you.
As I say, yeah, having seen the amount of meetings I've seen, well, actually, to be honest, looking at highlights, best meetings attended, and it follows on from the discussion about the National League and the youngsters coming through. There's no doubt that two of the best meetings that I've seen this year were the under-19 and the under-21 finals. 19s at Redcar, 21s at Birmingham, and just the way some of the younger lads are really coping with that step up, and that is really, really encouraging for the future. Obviously, Leon Flint won both meetings. I would say I've got absolutely no doubt at all in saying the standard of those meetings is way higher now than it was 7-8 years ago. So that's testament to the work that's being done at youth level, the lads coming through, and the way that they are approaching those events and the way they're approaching their start in the sport. So whilst I'm staying completely unbiased on the issue of league champions and big meetings elsewhere, and I've seen some great meetings definitely at all three levels. Certainly what we saw individually with the youth coming through and those title events, really enjoyed those meetings.
Okay, Ryan, I guess for you it was the time that you had to fill for 45 minutes while you had the air fence replaced at Sheffield, was it? No?
Yeah, that's one of the highlights. So filling in the national anthem at Perry Bar, which I don't know who the DJ is at Perry Bar, but decided to chop off halfway through before the under-21 final. But apart from that, I think it might be an obvious one to some, but I think the 2022 Premiership Grand Final between Sheffield and Bellevue at Alderton, if only every single British Speedway meeting could be like that, because it had everything, didn't it? It had absolutely fantastic racing throughout the night. Questionable, controversial refereeing decisions, which obviously could have gone one way or another. There was drama in the build-up, plenty to add more spice to the mix as well. And I can honestly not sum it up. When I watched it back on Eurosport, you don't really pick up how good the atmosphere was in the stadium that evening. It was absolutely heaving on bends 3 and 4, all the way across the home straight as well, even the bar inside as well. It was packed, and we had all the lights and the extra speakers. And honestly, the atmosphere that night was something special to be involved in, and it was just it was a privilege to be able to present that meeting on the centre green. One other thing I think is a good highlight. I think Eurosport have delivered some terrific coverage throughout the season again. And I know you're heavily involved, Ian, but British Speedway Network, I think, what they've done for British Speedway this year, certainly if you go back and watch the first meeting compared to when you watched the grand final the other night, I think that's absolutely fantastic what the team have done there. I know there's a big team of you behind the scenes, and looking forward to seeing what's improved on and delivered in 2023 now as well.
Being part of the BSN journey is one of the best things I've ever done. I've got to say, it has been amazing. Not just to be part of it and commentating on it and going to all the tracks and, living the Speedway life, but the people as well behind it, Martin and Ben. Adam Roynan's been working closely with us, Ollie Allen through the season as well. Gary Havelock has famously done some commentary with us. Stuart Dixon, Roscoe. There's so many, and apologies if we haven't mentioned it. Sedgy. So there's a lot of people who have been involved with it in some form or another. Hayley, Bromley, Paul Bowen, Lee Kilby, Jason Harold. Even my dad has been involved in it as well. So there's so many people who have been involved and made it. It's not a massive team, though. It's not a massive team. It's not a massive team of expertise in terms of broadcast experience. I'm from a broadcasting background, but I've never worked in telly or anything like that. I've never worked in commentary until about a year ago when I first did some for Redcar's stream. So it's all been a learning experience, and it just shows what you can do if you put your mind to it, because they've learnt it. They've learnt how to do it. And to have that product as polished as it is, with people who have just sat there and learnt it and put the hard work in, that's what it is. That's what BSN is. It's just been a load of passion from Speedway enthusiasts to create, a great product that thankfully people have really taken to and supported, and every single comment that people have made saying how much they've enjoyed it is been received with great thanks. And the equipment and the investment that they've made, yes, there has been a few blips along the way, but I can tell you that every single week, after every single meeting, there's always been what can we do to improve this? And things have improved week on week. And sometimes, it's a case of walking before you can run, but things will continue to evolve. Even in the final fixtures that they did, they invested and upgraded the connection between the cameras, so it was like fibre optics, whereas previously we were using data cables. Little things like that all improve it, but they're not cheap to do. And the only reason they can reinvest in that is from people buying it. So that the people have helped make it a success by buying into it, and of course the money, a large part, goes back into the clubs as well. So all of British Speedway benefits. So, yeah, thank you on behalf of those who are not here from BSN for your support this year. Probably rambling on a bit. Joe, what about you?
I'll just echo the thoughts of Ryan, really. That grand final night at Sheffield, the place was absolutely packed to the rafters. There was obviously a rivalry there, but the atmosphere generated by the Bellevue fans on Ben 4 and the Sheffield fans on the home straight really was something special, and not too dissimilar from when I went to Wroclaw for the Grand Prix. It really was everything that we love about the sport. The riders absolutely gave their all. All the racing was close, competitive. You had the likes of Norick Blador and Tom Brennan, Conor Mountain, these young lads trying to build a career on maybe the biggest nights of their career so far, giving it their absolute everything and proving to be the difference on both sides, really. And then, as I touched on there, Tom Brennan, Conor Mountain, seeing these guys riding every week. Conor Mountain this year has just come on leaps and bounds and made that transition out of the rising star berth. Tom Brennan's just the consummate professional. He's really threatening to take that next step. And just another thing on that grand final, the amount of local media attention and effort put in by the clubs in the build-up was staggering, really. We had BBC Radio Sheffield doing live broadcasts from the stadium, ITV Calendar down there doing interviews before or after. We had Steady and Damien Bates in the studio at BBC Radio Sheffield for an hour special. BBC Look North as well. The amount of coverage that was done there was just staggering. It's what we want for our sport, and it was really pleasing to see. It's probably a shame that wasn't the last meeting of the season, really, because the hype around social media and everything was just fantastic. It left a lasting impression on everyone, I believe.
Yeah, a tremendous way to finish off the season as well in the Premiership, and a great clash that sets things up nicely for next season, of course. Before we go, we should, of course, pay tribute to our friend who unfortunately departed at the start of the season, and I do wonder at times what he would have made, good and bad, about certain things over the course of this season. And those phone calls we all would have received from Nigel Pearson, of course, who I'm talking about, saying, "Hey, Alien, what are they doing, lad? I can't believe it. I cannot believe it." Those kind of calls that we would get from Nigel, were exasperated or excited, thrilled with what he'd just seen, or in utter disbelief, one way or the other, and sorely missed. But well, I've got to say, you guys, Joe, Ryan, Dave, you've had to pick up the majority of Nigel's responsibilities, and I think it's a huge testament to you as well to carry that on, and you realise now as well, probably more than you did, of how much he was involved in. I'm sure things keep coming out of the woodwork, perhaps, but huge props to you for carrying all that work on and picking up the baton and carrying it for Nige, because I'm sure he'd be pretty proud of everything that's been achieved this year.
We've talked about highlights of the season, and it's wrong to use the word highlight, because it's certainly not a highlight. But everyone who was there on the day of the funeral will never forget it. I won't forget the phone call I took from Ryan in the first place just before Easter weekend, and it's no exaggeration to say that it's changed everyone's life, it's changed everyone's work, it's changed everything. But the funeral day and the funeral event, because that's what it was, when the whole village of Wombourne stopped, they had to. The traffic was blocked, the police were there, so you can't get through because it was such a huge event, and in the end, on what was quite an overpowering day, a celebration as well of a sensational career in media, and of a all-round top man as well. So I'm not using the word highlight because you would never have wanted what happened to happen, but you're never going to forget that day in the middle of May when that funeral took place. And it's kind of you to say what you said, Ian, and basically we've all tried to carry on in the way in which we were taught, because we were all brought in by Nigel at some time or other. Me a bit several years ago now, but and these younger lads more recently. But we carry on doing what we do. We love the sport, and we carried on, and we always think of Nigel.
We certainly do, and this podcast is a result of Nigel, and the people on it together today are brought together by Nigel as well. So his work and everything else very much carries on even now, and will do long into the future. And that brings us to the end of the podcast, I think, and brings us to the end of the 2022 season as a whole. But look, it's November now. It's only going to be a few months, and we'll be back in action again, I'm sure, as soon as March comes around. Now, we are considering doing an extra episode of the podcast once the AGM has completed. Our aim is to bring you some answers from those involved in that later on this month. So look out for that, because I know that there will be questions, and often when there's questions, there's rumours, and what we want to do is let you hear it from those involved directly. So we're going to work on that later this month, a bit of a post-AGM and a 2023 preview special at some point. So keep your eyes peeled for that. Don't forget, check out the previous episodes. We've got loads of them. And I know that over the winter last year, many people went back through the old episodes of the podcast, even though they were really quite out of date in terms of what we were talking about. But all the guests we've had on, we've had many from all of the different clubs really across British Speedway, just to talk about what's happening at that moment in time. So if you've any episodes you've missed, do go back and have a listen to those, and keep up to date with everything happening in the meantime online. Social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Follow the official British Speedway channels, and of course the main britishspeedway.co.uk website will have all the main announcements as soon as they happen. As soon as we know, as soon as that word goes out there, those stories appear on the website, so you can rely on that for all the big team announcements. And we've got audio updates as well. If you like your podcasts in slightly more bite-sized form, we will be updating all the major announcements in audio form as well on the website. Have a great rest of the year and the close season. I say we will be back at some point to update you once the AGM and everything's been confirmed. And thanks for joining us through the course of this season on the official British Speedway podcast, which has gone from strength to strength, reaching fans not just across the UK but around the world as well. So thanks to you if you're listening in Australia or America or Sweden or Denmark or any of the other countries where we've got a bit of a following as well. And there's many of you, and thanks very much for joining us. And we'll be back very soon on the next episode of No Breaks, No Fear.
No Breaks, No Fear, the official British Speedway podcast.
Sports Social Podcast Network.
My brother-in-law died suddenly, and now my sister and her kids have to sell their home. That's why I told my husband we could not put off getting life insurance any longer. An agent offered us a 10-year, $500,000 policy for nearly $50 a month. Then we called SelectQuote. SelectQuote found us identical coverage for only $19 a month, a savings of $369 a year.
Whether you need a $500,000 policy or a $5 million policy, SelectQuote could save you more than 50% on term life insurance.
For your free quote, go to SelectQuote.com. SelectQuote.com. That's SelectQuote.com.
SelectQuote. We shop. You save. Full details on example policies at SelectQuote.com/commercials.